Welcome to SunnySpeaks, here again with another review for you, and you. And today I'm here to talk about Eddington, written and directed by Ari Aster and starring Joaquin Phoenix, Pedro Pascal, Emma Stone, and many more. In late May 2020, Eddington, a small town in New Mexico, is caught in the crossfire of two rivaling figures of the community. What starts as petty arguments spirals into betrayal, murder, and warfare. Eddington is the fourth feature-length film by Ari Aster, and if you weren't on board with his style before, I doubt that this one would make you a fan. But as a fan of all three of his films, how does Eddington hold up in his filmography? First, let's talk about our main character, Sherrif Joe Cross, played by Joaquin Phoenix. I guess Ari Aster has found his muse with his writing and directing style, because the pairing with this actor-director duo is something I'm down to see for years to come. Joaquin Phoenix is great as Joe Cross. The best word to describe his performance is layered. As the movie progresses, the story continues to peel back the mask on this character to reveal, honestly, a monster that should not be trusted whatsoever, but still being a character I liked following from beginning to end. Joaquin Phoenix is great at playing characters like this, thinking of a role like Joker, which is not a good movie to me now that I've rewatched it more, but his performance is still great and carries heavily throughout the film, and is playing a character who is morally flawed. Joe Cross is insecure and chooses to fight the strangest battles, like not wearing a mask during the pandemic or running for mayor because he constantly feels emasculated by the world even though he is in a position of power. My interpretation of the character is that the pandemic forced his true nature to be revealed. I think Joe could have been fine being the bumbling sheriff that people underestimate, harboring hatred but not doing anything with it. But the circumstances of his quarantine creates a mixed concoction of problems that builds his anger, and the pandemic itself creates a mission for him to stand for. Never for the better of Eddington, only for worse. Emma Stone plays Louise Cross, Joe's wife. This character deals with a lot of mental health struggles, and while feeling stuck during quarantine, she seeks answers on the internet in the forms of conspiracy theories. While not being a pointless character, I think Emma Stone wasn't able to cook as much as I would have liked to see, being an avid Emma Stone fan, especially after Poor Things, my favorite movie of 2023. From what I remember, there's not even one scene where she's by herself, so a lot of the information we get about her is from the perspective of Joe, which works in a way because as the movie devolves and Joe starts to spiral, you realize he's not a reliable narrator or character or husband or friend or sheriff or really anything. But especially because of where Louise's journey ends, I wish we could have seen more of her perspective singularly, especially on Joe. It would have been nice to see the other side of this relationship because their dynamic is really well done between these two actors, and they convey a lot of history between these two people while having a lot of disdain and feeling very estranged from each other. I think it was really well done. I just wish that we could have seen more of Louise as a character by herself. Pedro Pascal plays Ted Garcia, the mayor of Eddington and rival of Joe Cross. Ted Garcia also wears a mask when speaking to the people of Eddington, but in his private life, he's an asshole. Maybe not evil or a monster, but definitely an asshole. But he's also a father, and though having his own reasonings, he does want to make Eddington better as mayor of the town. This is the movie where I really am starting to feel my Pedro fatigue. He's not bad, but I don't think he needed to be in this role. I think Pedro Pascal is good at being ambiguous, and in this role, that is important in order to connect to the story overall. But for me, I think another actor could have been in this role and been a lot more camouflaged in the role, like Joaquin Phoenix does so well, like in this movie or in Beau is Afraid or in something like Joker. He feels very different while also having a constant within all of those roles, and yet, at least for me, I can only speak for myself, a lot of times I forget. I just kind of fall into the character he's portraying. And I don't think that Pedro Pascal is a bad actor. Again, I think that he is able to be very ambiguous with his emotions, which allows a lot of pull towards whatever character he's playing, wondering if they're good or if they're bad. But I just feel like for me, it was hard to immerse fully in his character and when he was on screen because of the fatigue of him just being everywhere right now. But I will also say that Joaquin Phoenix and Pedro Pedro Pascal do a great job with their rivalry as Joe Cross and Ted Garcia. They hate each other, but yet Ted Garcia is very polite and tries to be the friendly face of Eddington, while Joe Cross is really just done with his bullshit and is starting to call him out in front of everybody. And that leads to some very funny and interesting, intense confrontations between the two characters. Since this is the first Ari Aster movie that isn't horror-centric, is the filmmaker still able to craft an effective narrative without his go-to genre? The cool thing about Eddington to me is that Ari Aster pulls from his influences in this movie, especially the Coen brothers. Movies I thought of while watching was Fargo. I just instantly was thinking of that while watching this entire movie. And though it isn't a horror movie, it still feels reminiscent of Aster's earlier works because of him grabbing onto his other strengths: cringe and dark comedy. Two expressions that I think he got close to mastering with 2023's Beau is Afraid. Because of that movie, I realized Ari Aster has created a new horror genre I call cringe horror. With Eddington, because the setting is 2020, a lot is being said about the state of the world through the lens of our characters. And through that narrative choice, a lot of comedy is able to work. Maybe not burst out laughing or, oh my god, this is so funny, but I always respected the attempt, at the very least. And this movie has its fair share of cringe that I wouldn't say ever surpasses Beau is Afraid or the fart scene in Dream Scenario. If you know what I'm talking about, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But Ari Aster never fails to have you squirm in your seat at least a little. My favorite part of this movie is the darkness inside the story, which I think you could assume because of who this director is, but man, this movie is really, really dark. Though not being a horror film outright, there are some horrible choices made and horrific actions taken by some of our main characters. And because it allows real life events to bleed into the narrative and have our characters ask themselves questions about COVID, George Floyd, corruption, preservation of a small town from outside government, and the battle of belief versus reality. We as an audience are watching some bad people deal with things that are hard to grasp for anybody. And for me, seeing how these people in the story navigated these obstacles and moral quandaries, I always found interesting and kept me engaged. The worst part about this movie kind of goes hand in hand with my favorite part, which is the cultural and political commentary present in the script. Like I said, this movie is trying to say a lot about things that are not that far removed from the world. And while commending the movie for taking that swing on this sort of narrative, sometimes the message can feel see-through or empty when putting the message in full context with the rest of the movie. It's hard to have a powerful message, to me, about really anything when you follow a character that is abhorrent. Again, similar to Joker and its message about mental health. I do appreciate that the movie never stops to tell you this is good or this is bad. It just uses our characters as the mouthpiece for certain messages, but those thoughts being conveyed to other characters for narrative purposes. But for me, I think what this movie is trying to say can fall a little flat. But I also will argue that one of the things that Eddington is trying to do is snapshot that time in history and showcase how insane it all was. And I think it does that damn near perfectly. Not just with events discussed, but terminology and just the overall vibe of 5 years ago. Can't leave without talking about the cinematography. And while not being the most creative of his films, I could see this movie being my second or third favorite looking film by Ari Aster. Darius Kanji, hopefully I'm saying that right, is the cinematographer on the film. And he killed it, especially because this movie navigates so many different moments, from subdued slapstick comedy to political protests to full-blown shootouts with miniguns and heavy artillery, and the occasional explosion, if I remember correctly. Not only is the picture always clear and immersive, but always fits the narrative provided and only bolsters the story with its visuals. Overall, I would give this movie a mostly cloudy rating. To me, Eddington is really fun, and I think it's always a good time when Ari Aster drops because I know I'm going to see something different and see some high-level filmmaking. Though the movie has its flaws, and Ari Aster definitely likes to fill the runtime with things that I would say don't always need to be there, I never think it takes away from the overall experience and the experience that Ari Aster provides is always something different. And I also think something I love about his directing, I know when I watch this movie a second time, I'm gonna catch something different. He always creates the option for a second viewing being different than the first, and I really appreciate that. If you want my ranking of his films, I would go Hereditary, Beau is Afraid, Midsommar, Eddington. This has been my review of Eddington. If you have seen Eddington, let me know what you think in the comments down below, because perspective is key. And if you haven't, let me know if this review makes you want to go see the movie or not. Also curious on what your ranking would be of his movies, if you've seen the movie or not. These three movies, Hereditary, Beau is Afraid, and Midsommar, have done a lot in our culture film-wise, and I don't think that Eddington is going to do a lot, honestly. I feel like it's going to bomb. I hope it doesn't, because it's very different and something that is really cool, but I just have a bad feeling. Hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully you go see it. Hopefully this review makes you want to go see it. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. I'll be back again. Peace.